Good afternoon. Shall I start?
Yeah, you go, Oliver.
Okay, thank you. My name's Oliver Hitchcock. I'm the technical lead for the Shell Eco Marathon. I don't know if you've heard of that before. So I'm going to present the event and then how that fits in with HP and data services. Now, I'm going to do this in English. Sorry, my Dutch is appalling. And I'll try not to use the word data too much. All right, so before we get into the event as it is now, I wanted to go through a little bit of its history. Now, has anybody heard of the Eco Marathon before, the Shell Eco Marathon? Yes, there's one, two. All right, good, you win a prize. Now, it started in 1939 when two of our engineers at the Woodward Research Facility in Illinois, they had a bet. They said, well, hold on, which one of us can drive our car the furthest on a gallon of fuel? Now, they performed this little bet, and at the time, they managed an astounding 21 kilometers per litre, which might not sound too bad. But if I give you that in context now, the world record holder for our event can actually manage over 3,500 kilometers on 1 litre of gasoline. So we've come a long way in that time.
Moscow to Paris, isn't it?
Moscow to Paris, yeah, on 1
litre.
litre of fuel.
Yeah.
Now, the event went quiet then for a few years, and it started up again in 1985 in France. And it's been running every year for 30 years now in Europe. We now do it on 3 continents with over 5,000 students, 500 teams. The good question is, why does Shell do this? Why do we do this every year? Why do we go through the torture of organizing this with all those students, all those cars, everything that goes with it? One of the key words in here is mobility, smart mobility. It's what drives our society. It's a key part of our economy. Oh, that's a terrible word. So it's about smart products, the way we use fuel. It's about smart infrastructure, what cars, planes, trains run on. And then it's the education of the users, so driving smarter, driving better. That's what we're trying to get across to the visitors and students who come to our event. There's, of course, also the fact that we have some of the world's best minds from the world's best engineering schools and universities. Now, I'm going to let some of my colleagues do some of the work with a short presentation. Very short. So before I hand over to Martin, I wanted to give you an idea of the scale of this event. So it really is a fabulous engineering adventure. I'm very passionate about this. And over the 3 events that we have in 2016 now, we start with Manila. So we're driving downtown Manila in the Philippines. Then we go to Detroit, driving amongst some of the legendary buildings, skyscrapers in downtown Motor City. And then we go next year to London for the big event at Olympic Park. Now, that's 5,000 students every year in each of those events, all combined. We've got 120,000 visitors who come to see us. And HP allows us to bring the event alive to these people through data, through live data, through a whole bunch of different initiatives that we've put together. Now I'll show you some of these screenshots. Now, I'm told there's a laser on here, so this is one of the initiatives that we built this year. So we put sensors in all of the cars, and I'll let Martin explain all about this in a minute, but we put sensors in all of the cars to allow the public to see on both their mobile phones and on large screens where the cars are in real time. So we've got these little dots as they go around the track. And we can actually see what their speed is, what their fuel type is, what their category is in real time. This is all about bringing the event alive for our visitors. Again, there's a whole list of reasons why we do this in terms of the live data, and I'll let Martin talk about that architecture later on. This is one of the internet results screens. So this is, again, live data going over the internet, giving live results to the public. Now, I'll let Martin, who's been with us now for nearly 2 years, I think,
Yes.
who
Yes.
enables all of these wonderful solutions to carry on.
Thanks, Oliver. So first of all, just to introduce myself briefly, I'm the Chief Data Officer for Hewlett Packard. I am actually an oil and gas guy as well, so I actually joined Hewlett Packard from Shell and BP. So this kind of stuff in oil is kind of in my blood anyway. So, but it's really great to be working back in that industry with Oliver. So, but it's really a great pleasure for us to be doing this kind of thing, because for me, big data for quite a long time now, people have been wondering what it is, what they can do with it, extrapolating from the traditional BI and analytics that they've been used to. For me, this particular event is a really great example of the kind of real things that big data can do in a very practical sense, bringing together lots of different types of information together. So this model here is just intended to give a kind of storyboard as to the kinds of different information that we use, not just for Eco Marathon, but lots of other things that HP do in the big data space as well. We hear all about the many Vs, and I'm not going to go into those because you're all probably very well versed in what all that stuff is. But essentially, you know, we've probably spent the last 20 years or so extracting data from our transactional systems and turning them into charts and graphs and doing KPIs and reports. We've now seen the emergence of these systems of control, so machines coming to life, things like oil wells, oil rigs, cars, people's trainers, tennis rackets have all got sensors in, and that's the systems of control, okay, that, you know, bringing the actual physical world to life. And then systems of engagement that we all feel in our everyday lives, when we shop online, when we buy an airline ticket, the social interactions that we see. And actually for us in HP, what big data really means is about creating opportunity through the convergence of all these different types of potential sources of insight. So eventually we bring all these together, and we refer to it as a system of insight, when you can use and bring all this data together to do things you couldn't do before, know things that were previously unknowable. For us, it's as simple as that. And we've tried to bring that to life in the Eco Marathon. If you think about I'll talk about some of the screens and some of the artifacts we deliver and some of the analytics we do a bit later, but we're actually converging information from here, here, and here to actually bring this event to life, excuse me, for the audience to make it a compelling event. It's quite an idiosyncratic thing, isn't it, Oliver? A load of vehicles doing huge miles per gallon, driving pretty slowly around a track in a city. So there has to be another way to engage the audience and make it interesting and compelling. And we do that through the use of data, so people understand what's going on. So it's very much a data-driven event.
Very much.
The other big aspect of the Eco Marathon as well is that this thing just pops up in different cities around the world. So the logistics of setting up big data type solutions, setting up track, building 3G networks and wireless mesh networks to be able to get the data off the cars. It's a huge logistical effort. So this is big data, but physicalized in a way that you've probably not seen before. Okay, so I'll just try and explain the various components that make this up. So this is one of those pseudo architectures that we're all probably quite familiar with. But just to, we started over here, right? These are the stakeholders. These are the kind of people that both attend the Eco Marathon, run the Eco Marathon, or have some other interest in the Eco Marathon. So it's hard to read this. I'll just describe who these different stakeholders are. First of all, we've got Shell's own CX team. This is their external communications team. They want to know what people are talking about. They want to know what the themes are that people are interested in. They want to know how to shape the Eco Marathon next year. So social data, the interaction with the general public is very, very important to them. The teams themselves, these are engineers, mostly students, extremely clever people, the kind of people that are going to be running industry in the next few years, hopefully. These guys are really, really interested in the real minuscule data that's coming off the vehicles, the sensors, the machine data. How can they engineer cars that go beyond 3,500 miles per litre? Kilometres per litre. And stretch those boundaries even further. So they want the data, they want to be able to play with it. We do some of that for them with our own data science teams, but to be honest, a lot of the faculties in the universities, which we work with very closely, are absolutely brilliant at this anyway. So we have a very open data policy with them. So next year we're going to be sharing all this data with them in a way that allows them to look across it in a kind of anonymised way. Then we got the public. These are people. How many people did we have in Rotterdam earlier this year?
50,000.
50,000. So we've got 50,000 people walking into the event in Rotterdam, some of whom are children. You know, they want to know what's going on. It's quite an exciting environment, but we need to explain it to them. And we do that by taking all this data and turning it into stories, making it an interesting, compelling story that we can tell them through that lens. And then finally, this is all underpinned by a whole series of various analytical things that we build. Some of them are around social, some around vehicles, some of them are just massive screens that are in the event that help tell the story. So there's a whole different set of artifacts. And we also deliver some of these more immersive things on a mobile app as well, because students and certain people who attend, they don't want to be looking at screens, or they just want it on their mobile device, right? So we ship this stuff out to mobility as well. All of this is underpinned by HP's Haven platform. So here we've got our Vertica database. If any of you want to know more about that, the guys are out there on the floor. You can go and ask them. But this is a columnar-based high-performance database for performing analytical queries. And IDLE, some of you may know as being the engine for dealing with human information. So we use that to understand the context that information that's been written by humans that is, often idiosyncratic and multi-language. What are they actually saying, and how do we infer meaning from that data? I won't go into the rest of this, but basically there's a whole raft of other technologies as well around the network and how we provision data to the database in these places that just pop up like Detroit and Rotterdam. Just some very brief, don't want to bore you with lots of pretty pictures of pie charts and things and various other histograms, but you can imagine the kind of things we do. This one's a social thing. Now, the important thing here, and we'll conclude this a bit later on, is that we don't really know what it is we want to know until we start filtering through the data and start to discover what it is that we're looking for, right? So it's very much an exploratory, investigative type process that we go through here, particularly in the social space. Sometimes we find things that we didn't expect, and that then drives us off down another channel of investigation. So these are really intended to help the Shell team understand how they should shape. Now, this one for me is probably the most interesting one of all the things that we did this last year. So these plots here are social interactions. This is Rotterdam.
Rotterdam, yeah.
And we noticed during Rotterdam that there was a massive amount of social input, which was very positive in Istanbul, right? So we're all in Rotterdam, going through the UK Marathon, and we just happened to notice that there was lots of social content going on in Istanbul. What on earth is that all about, right? So that is now causing us to say, what is it about that particular city where people have a really deep interest in the UK Marathon? What does that tell us about where we might need to place the UK Marathon in 2017, 2018? So these are insights that you gain. We didn't have a specific business question when we started this, but by analysing and using the data in particular ways, we're able to learn things that we can then go and move on and take a different course of action. Unfortunately, it's not live, this one, but when we zoomed out from this, you could see this huge array of social things, Instagram, tweets, all kinds of different social feeds, all coming out of Istanbul, and lots of other interesting things too. Now, this is something that is quite close to my heart, because I see a lot of people, a lot of businesses, really struggling to get started with big data, right? So there's almost like a standoff between those of us who specialise in this space and the business, as we call it, where the business can't tell you what they want because they don't know what's possible, and so you end up in this kind of stalemate situation. So we're really encouraging much more of a data lab, exploratory type process where it's completely acceptable to not know what your use case is before you start. Have some idea of the kind of value you're trying to create, but actually start it with a very open, inquisitive, exploratory, creative mindset. We've done this with the UK Marathon, and it's starting to pay dividends for us. Again, just another artifact to show you, we're starting to look at what do people think about different fuel types. So again, in our home lives, we know there's a big debate at the moment about diesel. Is it a clean fuel? Is it a dirty fuel? What should we do about diesel? Hydrogen. I'd quite like a hydrogen car, but there's no filling stations. What do we do about electric-powered cars? So there's a whole discussion about it. Shell want to understand and create a dialogue with the general public about different fuel types. So through the lens of the UK Marathon, we're now starting to understand fuel type performance as well. And finally, just looking to the future, some of the other things that HP does in the automotive space, This is stuff that we brought from car manufacturers that we're actually doing right now. We're going to bring some of this technology into the Eco Marathon as well. So this is really about augmenting the drivers, so having sensors on the actual drivers themselves as well, extending the level of machine sensing that we do on the vehicle so we can gain even more insights. Ultimately, we're also looking at UAVs and onboard high definition video for doing lots of other things. So, analytics on video is pretty common now. We do lots of it in lots of different industries. We want to bring that to the Eco Marathon. And the good news for the kind of relationship and partnership we have with Shell is that whilst this is going on in the Eco Marathon, which is a confined kind of scope and space that we can kind of be quite experimental, we're now taking lots of these learnings into other parts of Shell's business. So upstream oil production, downstream refining, and into the retail space as well. So it's a really good kind of microcosm of what can be done, and you can then start to learn from that and expand it out into other parts of the business. Oliver, do you want to conclude on this?
Yes. If I can have that back.
On that, just in case you want to.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
How long have we got? All right. One of the questions we get asked quite a lot is, well, this is fabulous, it's great, but what do you get out of it? Is there anything you can actually produce that's useful? It's great having cars going around the track. The students are fantastic. They spend years building the cars. But what do you get out of it? Now, I wanted to give you two very good examples. The first one is something that industry gets out of this. Now, you've all got cars now that have start and go. So when you get to a red light, the car stops. That came from the Eco Marathon, end of the 80s. Fiat took it on board, and Fiat was the first car manufacturer to introduce that into the mass market. That came from the Eco Marathon. You can imagine how much fuel savings we've had from that. The second part is the students. What do the students get out of all of this data? What are we doing for them to make their lives better, make them more performant? So I wanted to give you a quick example from the Rotterdam track. Now, this is one of our internal maps of how this works. So the cars run around this track. It's a 1.6 kilometer track. They'll do 10 laps for one attempt. They've got 39 minutes to do it. That's one attempt. What we do then is we measure their energy consumption. We extrapolate from there how much fuel they would have used, how many kilometers they would have done for 1 liter of fuel, or 1 unit of energy. Now, the example I'm going to give you is a battery electric car. So there's a purely battery powered car. Now, what happened was we took their data, and I'm sorry this graph is a little bit dull. It was supposed to be quite bright, but anyway, it came out dull. What we've got along here is time along our x-axis and speed for about 24 minutes of their attempt. So bear in mind that it's about 2.5 minutes per attempt. So we're looking at this section here would be 1 lap. And what we're seeing is the speed's going from 0, the start, up to about 20 corners and what have you, even braking very hard at certain points. So we sat down and we said, well, empirically, what should the what should the energy use look like? So we did a little bit of prediction on it, and we said, well, something like that. So they should be coming out here for a total attempt at about 150,000 joules of energy. Now, the team went out. Fabulous, great. So we measured it, and we had a look at what they actually used when they got back. The second yellow line is what they were actually using. We were blown away. This is how data helped us to really, it's a surprise, it's great. So we sat down with the team and said, guys, what's going on? You've used twice the energy that we predicted that you'd use. And we looked at their car, we looked at how they'd built it, how it was running, and we found that all of this delta, this 200% of what we'd predicted, was actually parasitic energy use. They were never turning off the engine. So they came back the next year, and I haven't got their data from this year, sorry, their next attempt, and it wasn't quite exactly half, but it was considerably better, and they went on to win. There we go. 10 minutes left, thank you. That's it from me. There's 2 examples of how we're using data to make the event better. Yeah.
I guess before we kind of kick on, has anybody got any questions or observations or things you want to ask before we just keep going and telling you the story? Or are you all good for now? Yeah, okay.
We've done a wonderful job of explaining the whole thing.
So we want to share with you what we've actually learned from this. And we're not talking about rocket science here, are we, right? This is just the application of new technologies, the application of different ways of thinking to do something practical and valuable that we can then learn from and take into other places. But for us, these are the things that we thought would be useful to share with you. And again, you may know some of these things already, but I think from a message from us to you in terms of having done this and been quite successful with it, these are the things that we think are really important in terms of making big data work. It's a journey of discovery. I see lots of, again, I mentioned this earlier, lots of people struggling to articulate requirements. You're not going to get them. I don't think you're going to get them. And it's not going to be easy to get requirements because people don't know what they can have. So they're not going to write it down. Okay? And if they do write it down, it might be the wrong thing anyway. So, enter this whole journey as if it's a piece of discovery, using a scientific methodology of discovery as well if you can. They're not called data scientists by accident, right? So we need to get the right methodology to match with the skill sets we've got. And I see too many kind of traditional BI type organizations trying to do data science using traditional BI methodologies. So take this on board, right? Be open-minded and exploratory rather than having preconceptions about what you're going to discover. Now, this gets very difficult when you're talking about a value proposition where you need to go to your board or your chair, whoever it is, and ask for funding if you can't tell them what the outcome's going to be, right? So that's quite challenging. So if you don't have people in your executive that actually believe that you can get value by being investigative and exploratory, that's going to be quite hard. We're very lucky working with Shell in that there's lots of people in that particular business who are willing to go and explore. Now that might be cultural. There's a big cultural thing there. Shell's a business that's willing to go and drill in deep water and various other difficult places. So there's obviously that mentality to do that. It does require that, in my view. Again, you may have different views, and I'll be very happy for you to come and share them with me afterwards. But this is what we've learned from doing this. Start with value equals learning. So a lot of people have said to me, what does that actually mean? Well, in principle, knowing more is better than knowing less. So if you start on a journey of discovery using data as your base ingredient, how could you argue as a business that knowing more about your consumer or knowing more about your vehicles can be a bad thing? So start with the principle of learning. Okay, knowing more is better than knowing less, but start that learning process by associating it with a strategic objective. We want to make cars go further. Right? That's a baseline that you can hang your learning off, or whatever it might be in your own business. So start with learning, align that to a strategic goal. The other thing is, there's a big discussion at the moment I get involved in as a chief data officer anyway, is which data is important, which data can we throw away? We've learned that all data is important, all of it. We talk about digital content now rather than data, because data infers kind of rows and columns, but thinking about digital content, because we use video to do analytics, don't we? So it's digital content, right? It's all important, it's all valuable, but it's all valuable in different contexts. So if I want to produce some analytics about the way my client is behaving, knowing what the invoice number for the last bill I sent them is not very useful, is it? But in a different context, it might be extremely useful, right? So it's all valuable, but it's all about context. So make sure you understand the context of all the data that you're dealing with and start to classify it in those ways. And finally, be creative. I strongly believe, and not just working with Shell, but lots of other industries and clients as well, that it's that mentality of being creative, being willing to experiment, discover and learn. That is how new insights are being created. And you need to create a cultural as well as a technical environment in which to be able to go and achieve that. I'm sure this is nothing new to you all, but for some of you who already believe this, it's probably nice to hear it from someone else as well, right? It gives a bit more credence to the things you're trying to push in your own businesses. And that's it from us. So hopefully it's been useful. You've learned something, or at least you know what we're doing now. And finally, any questions from anybody? Anything you want to ask us before we head off?
No.
Thank you. At the start, you were talking about the 3 different data sets you were collecting. So
yep.
The system of record, control, and engagement. And the examples you gave were, in my view, not really a product of the combination of these 3 types, but more like an insight from one of those 3 types. Can you give me an insight you gathered from really the combination of those 3 data types?
Can you, Oliver? Not off the top of my head. I think that's a good observation. Yeah. Is this mic still on? Yeah,
they're still on. Yeah, and I'm just thinking.
I think I think off the top of my head, you're quite right. For the time being, and we've been doing this for a couple of years now. Most of our insights are gained in one of those domains. I think we are starting to think about how we mash some of these things up a little more now, particularly when we start looking at more deeper machine data and how that's working with particular faculties. But that's our objective. All the data is available to us in a single platform, so we do have the capacity to do that. I think if I reflect on where we are on that journey of discovery, I think we're still, even 2 years in, we're right at the beginning of it, to be honest. But that's certainly given me an impetus to go and
Thank you
look for that. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Can't see any other hands. So
No
thank you.
questions anymore?
Yep.
Nothing? All right. All right. It was
All right.
probably crystal clear.
no doubt. Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.